Hi, I'm Sophie Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. My life has always been quiet and predictable, but that's how I like it. I work as a nurse at the local hospital here, and it's a job I genuinely enjoy. It brings me a sense of purpose and stability. Every day, I get to care for people and make a small difference in their lives. It's not a glamorous job, but it's mine, and it suits me perfectly. I was raised by my grandfather after I lost my parents when I was young. He was a kind, gentle man who made sure I had everything I needed. My parents' passing was a huge loss, but my grandfather's love and care helped me get through those tough times. He instilled in me a deep sense of responsibility and compassion, values that I carry with me into my work every day. My days at the hospital are filled with familiar faces and routines. There's Mrs. Carter, an elderly lady who loves mystery novels and often asks me about the latest books. Then there's Mr. Davis, a retired teacher who shares his stories of the past whenever he visits. These interactions, though simple, bring me comfort and a sense of belonging. They make my workdays feel meaningful. My life took a sudden turn about 6 months ago when I met Andrew. Andrew is a 34-year-old software developer who had just moved to Asheville for a new job. I first saw him when he came into the hospital to volunteer. At first, I thought he was just another well-meaning individual trying to give back. But as time went on, I realized there was something different about him. Andrew was confident and charming, with a way of making people feel at ease. He started visiting the hospital regularly, always under the pretense of volunteering. I noticed how he took an interest in my work and how he seemed genuinely concerned about the patients. Our conversations were light and pleasant, and he quickly became a familiar face. One day, as we were chatting in the hospital cafeteria, Andrew looked at me with a glint in his eye. "Sophie," he said, "I'd really like to get to know you better. How about we grab dinner sometime?" I was taken aback, but intrigued. "Sure, I'd like that," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Our dinner dates became a regular occurrence, and our bond grew stronger with each passing week. Andrew was attentive and kind, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like someone was genuinely interested in me. It was a new and exciting experience, one that I hadn't anticipated but welcomed with open arms. After a few months, Andrew proposed. It was a beautiful evening, and he got down on one knee with a ring that sparkled in the dim light. "Sophie, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice full of hope. I hesitated. My heart was pounding, and my mind raced with doubts. I remember how his parents, Evelyn and Charles, had reacted when I met them. They were wealthy and seemed dismissive of my modest background. Evelyn's gaze was icy, and Charles's remarks about my lack of social standing made me feel small. Despite my reservations, I said yes. I told myself that Andrew's love was worth navigating these new, uncomfortable social dynamics. I was willing to overlook the disapproval of his parents and focus on the love we shared. At their insistence, we signed a prenuptial agreement. Andrew assured me it was just a formality, and I agreed without much fuss. I didn't have much to lose, or so I thought. After our wedding, I moved into Andrew's house. It was a lovely place, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't truly ours. Evelyn and Charles frequently visited unannounced, and their behavior was both intrusive and demeaning. They would walk into the house and immediately make themselves at home, often reminding me of my place. One day, Evelyn walked into the kitchen and said, "Remember, Sophie, in case of a divorce, you can't claim any of this." Her comment stung, but I tried to brush it off. It was a constant reminder that everything in the house, from the furniture to the decor, was not truly mine. Andrew's behavior started changing, too. He became distant and began joining in on the jokes his parents made about me. It was painful to see the man I had fallen in love with turning into someone unrecognizable. The stress of living in such a toxic environment began to take its toll on me. I started experiencing severe stomach pains, but I tried to ignore them. It wasn't until I collapsed at work that I realized how bad things had become. I woke up in the hospital, feeling weak and alone. The doctor said it was stress-related, and I knew that something had to change. During my hospital stay, I received a visit from a lawyer. He informed me that my great-aunt, whom I barely remembered, had passed away and left me a $15 million inheritance. The news was shocking and surreal. For a moment, I couldn't comprehend the magnitude of it. My life had been so simple, and now it was about to change dramatically. Andrew and his parents were suddenly overly affectionate when they learned about the inheritance. Their sudden shift in behavior was unsettling. I overheard them talking about how they could secure the money for themselves. That's when I realized their true intentions. The kindness they had been showing was nothing more than a facade. I knew then that I had to take control of my life and stand up for myself. The inheritance was a turning point, but it was up to me to decide how to use it and how to move forward. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to reclaim my life and find a way to turn this unexpected fortune into something meaningful. The moment I learned about the $15 million inheritance, everything felt like it was spinning out of control. The shock was overwhelming, and I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The money was a significant amount, enough to change my life completely. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how it might also change the dynamics in my marriage. Andrew's sudden concern and his parents' overly attentive behavior made me uneasy. They were no longer the same people I had known before the inheritance news. Their fake concern and gestures of affection felt like a ploy. I could see right through them, and their true colors started to show. After my discharge from the hospital, I began to consider my options. I knew I couldn't stay in the house where I was constantly belittled and reminded of my place. Andrew's behavior had turned hostile, and the loving husband I once knew seemed to be lost. I needed to make some serious decisions about my future. One evening, as I was sitting alone in the house, I found myself thinking about the inheritance and what it could mean for me. I had always been a practical person, and now was no different. I decided to meet with the lawyer who had informed me about the inheritance. I needed to understand the full extent of my new reality and what steps I should take. When I met with the lawyer, he explained that the inheritance came with a significant amount of responsibility. The funds were intended for me to use as I saw fit, but there were legal safeguards in place to ensure that no one else could claim them. That brought me some relief, but I knew I had to act quickly to protect myself. With a clear understanding of my legal rights, I began to plan my next steps. I decided to file for divorce. The prenuptial agreement Andrew and I had signed seemed to protect my assets, but I wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. I met with a divorce lawyer who assured me that my inheritance was safe and would remain solely mine. The hardest part of this process was confronting Andrew. I had to tell him that I was leaving, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. I rehearsed what I wanted to say and prepared myself for his reaction. I didn't want to make any accusations or arguments. I just needed to state the facts and take control of my life. The day came when I finally faced him. We sat down in the living room, and I took a deep breath. "Andrew, we need to talk," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've decided to file for divorce. The recent events have made me realize that this relationship isn't what I thought it was. I need to take control of my life and protect my future." Andrew's face turned pale. He looked stunned and confused. "Sophie, wait, let's talk about this," he stammered. "We can work things out." I shook my head. "I don't think we can. The way you and your parents have treated me has made it clear that this marriage isn't healthy. I need to move on and focus on what's best for me." His parents, who had been hovering in the background, rushed in when they heard the conversation. Evelyn's face was a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't do this, Sophie," she said. "This is all a misunderstanding." Charles chimed in. "You have no right to leave with that money. It's meant for the family." Their attempts to convince me otherwise only reinforced my decision. I was no longer willing to be a pawn in their game. I stood firm and told them that I had made up my mind and that the divorce was happening. Over the next few weeks, the divorce process was a whirlwind. I packed up my things and moved out of the house. It was bittersweet to leave behind the place where I had hoped to build a life with Andrew, but it was also liberating to finally be free from the toxic environment. I found a small, cozy apartment that felt like a fresh start. It was a place where I could begin to rebuild my life on my own terms. The weight of the inheritance was still heavy, but I knew it was time to focus on using it in a way that would bring me peace and fulfillment. The money had given me an opportunity to change my life, and I was determined to use it wisely. The next step was to find a meaningful way to honor my great-aunt's legacy and make a positive impact with my newfound fortune. Starting over was never easy, but it was necessary. After the divorce, I moved into a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The space was modest, but it felt like a sanctuary from the chaos I had left behind. With the inheritance now firmly in my control, I had the freedom to shape my future. But I needed to find a purpose for it beyond just my personal comfort. My great-aunts had left specific instructions. Part of the inheritance was to be used for a charitable cause. I was determined to honor her wishes and make a positive impact. I started researching local organizations and causes that resonated with me. I wanted to find something that aligned with my values and experiences. One cause that particularly struck a chord was supporting victims of domestic abuse. My own experience with Andrew and his parents had given me a new perspective on the challenges faced by those in toxic and abusive relationships. I knew I wanted to help others find a way out of similar situations. I reached out to a local organization that helped domestic abuse survivors. The organization, called Safe Horizons, was dedicated to providing shelter, counseling, and resources for those in need. I scheduled a meeting with the director, who was both welcoming and appreciative of my interest. During our conversation, I learned about the gaps in their services and the challenges they faced in securing funding. The more I listened, the more I realized that my inheritance could make a significant difference. I decided to use a portion of the $15 million to help Safe Horizons expand their services. I funded the establishment of a new shelter, which would provide safe housing and support for victims of abuse. It was a substantial investment, but I felt a deep sense of purpose in contributing to such a meaningful cause. As the shelter began to take shape, I became more involved in its development. I met with architects, social workers, and other professionals to ensure that the facility would meet the needs of its future residents. I also helped organize fundraising events to support the shelter and raise awareness about domestic abuse. The process was both challenging and rewarding. It required a lot of time and effort, but it also brought me a sense of fulfillment that I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making a real difference. The project gave me a renewed sense of purpose and helped me heal from the wounds of my past. During this time, I also reconnected with an old friend, Emily. We had lost touch over the years, but when I reached out to her, she was incredibly supportive. Emily had always been a source of strength and encouragement in my life. We spent hours catching up and discussing my new project. Her presence was a comforting reminder of the positive relationships I had in my life. As the shelter neared completion, I was invited to the grand opening ceremony. It was an emotional event, filled with gratitude and hope. Seeing the shelter come to life and knowing that it would provide a safe haven for those in need was incredibly rewarding. It was a testament to the positive change that could come from overcoming adversity and taking control of one's life. While the shelter was a significant achievement, I knew that my journey wasn't over. I continued to work closely with Safe Horizons, providing ongoing support and advocating for the cause. I also made it a point to stay involved in my community and support other initiatives that aim to empower individuals and promote social justice. Looking back, I realize how far I've come since those dark days with Andrew and his family. The inheritance, while initially a source of stress and uncertainty, ultimately became a catalyst for positive change in my life. It allowed me to rediscover my sense of purpose and find fulfillment in helping others. The road to self-discovery and empowerment wasn't easy, but it was worth every step. I had broken free from a toxic relationship and used my newfound fortune to create something meaningful. As I continued on this journey, I felt more confident and capable than ever before, ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. I never imagined how dramatically my life would change after those tumultuous years. The final chapter of my story is one of renewal and self-empowerment, of finding strength I didn't know I had, and embracing a future full of possibilities. After the shelter was established and functioning smoothly, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Helping Safe Horizons provide a sanctuary for victims of domestic abuse was more than just fulfilling my great-aunt's wish. It was a personal victory. I had turned the pain and betrayal I experienced into something positive that could help others. The knowledge that lives would be changed because of the support we provided gave me immense satisfaction. However, my journey didn't end there. The money from the inheritance had given me a new perspective on what I wanted from life. I had been so focused on recovering from my past and establishing the shelter that I had almost forgotten to think about my own personal growth and happiness. I decided to take some time for myself and explore interests and activities I had neglected for years. One of the first things I did was to reconnect with my passions. I had always loved painting, but had put it aside for practical reasons. I began taking art classes and found a creative outlet that allowed me to express myself and relax. The process of painting became therapeutic and a source of joy, reminding me of the importance of nurturing one's passions and creativity. Reconnecting with Emily also played a significant role in this new phase of my life. Her friendship was a steady reminder of the supportive relationships I had, and we spent more time together, exploring new hobbies and simply enjoying each other's company. Emily's presence was a comfort and a symbol of the positive changes in my life. I also decided to take a step back from the intense work of managing the shelter to focus on self-care. I traveled to places I had always wanted to visit, allowing myself to experience new cultures and perspectives. These trips were not just about leisure, but about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted from life. In addition to personal growth, I continued to advocate for the causes I cared about. I became involved in local activism and supported various initiatives aimed at social justice and community support. It was empowering to use my voice and resources to affect change and contribute to causes I believed in. Reflecting on my life, I realized how much I had grown since those early days of struggling with Andrew and his parents. The $15 million inheritance had been a turning point, but it was the choices I made afterward that truly defined my journey. I had learned to stand up for myself, to recognize my worth, and to build a future on my own terms. The experience with Andrew and his family had been painful, but it also taught me valuable lessons about resilience and self-worth. I learned that true happiness comes from within and that breaking free from toxic relationships is essential for personal growth. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but each step I took led me closer to a life of fulfillment and purpose. As I look forward to the future, I feel a sense of peace and optimism. My life now is a testament to the power of self-discovery and empowerment. I have built a new path for myself, one that reflects my values and passions, and I am ready to embrace whatever comes next with confidence and hope. This journey has been about more than just overcoming obstacles. It's been about discovering who I truly am and what I want from life. And as I continue to move forward, I carry with me the lessons learned and the strength gained from a story that began with hardship but ended in hope and renewal.